First up, the Chief Business Officer, Z Studios, Shariq Patel. Let's give him a big, big round of applause. Shariq, thank you so much for joining us. The co-founder and director on the board, Arha Media and Broadcasting Company Private Limited, Ajit, Thakur. Ajit, thank you so much for joining us. Producer, Laika Productions, Ashish Singh. Ashish, thank you so much. Producer, GBA, Amar Butala. Thank you, Amar, for joining us. Chief Operating Officer, Viacom 18 Studios, Ajit Andhare. Let's give him a big, big round of applause, Ajit. And of course, the Partner Media and Entertainment Advisory Services at Ernst & Young, Ashish Ferwani. Well, we're right now on our second panel discussion, the future of content. Ashish, over to you.
Thank you. And welcome everyone to this session. We've got a bunch of, how do I put it politely? Creative people with us, very creative people with us, and hopefully we'll have a lot of fun on understanding content. As this session is about the future of content, right? Which is a very strange topic actually when you go to see, because we've had a lot of content in the past, and the next 3 years already known, right? So we know where we are headed. But as I was interacting with these very, very creative people, I realized that between them they have 100 years of experience. At NBOC levels, not GBOC levels, right? 100 years of content experience sitting on the stage. So I said, okay, how do I take this to the next level, and how do I ask them some slightly uncomfortable questions? So diving right in to the first uncomfortable question, all right, is that we are seeing so much consolidation happening, right? We are seeing so many platforms even collapsing at some level, right? Will this demand for content that's been driving the last 10, 20 years in India even continue this way? And I'm going to start with the most margin-focused of the lot. Shariq, go for it.
The simple answer to that is yes. I think the demand for content will, has been increasing. I think we saw, huge acceleration thanks to the pandemic. But I think the demand continues. It's a question of how much we can supply at the right cost and the right price points now. I think that's where it's coming down to. All of us are, spending more time on our mobile screens, or, or at home on connected TVs, or, at cinemas. So, the content demand is there. So it will continue to be there as we go along. I think the challenge for all of us and everyone in the room is how do you produce it, at the right price point. I think that will be the challenge.
I'm going to ask you, so there's some wonderful research released recently which shows that actually the time people spend on a connected device, not a CTV, but even a mobile, only about 10 to 15% is spent on entertainment, and there's 85% spent outside of entertainment as we see it, which is movies and episodic and stuff like that. It could be short video, social, utility, whatever. So is that something that's going to shape the future and impact content demand, or you still see that 10% as actually something that will grow in the future?
No, so I think the answer was that yes, content is getting consumed. I mean, is it coming from studios like us, and content will only continue to be consumed more? I think it's a little, we'll be a little arrogant to think that we are the only ones who can create that content, right? I mean, or we are the gatekeepers. I think there's no longer any gatekeeper. I mean, gatekeeper for the larger big budget is still us. But the way social media creators are creating, we were discussing this offline, that, the amount of time all of us spend in our commutes or at home or whatever, just watching reels or whatever it is, some great content is coming out. And I think that how to channelize those content creators into a little bit more mainstream. I think Bhuvan Bam is managed to do some stuff, and like that I think you'll see a lot more such creators coming up with interesting stories or characters which at some point or the other we will not be able to ignore. So I think the content creation, I mean, as I said, it's not just us
needed, but
content
is it
needed,
just us? Certainly not.
Absolutely not.
Okay, please, Ashish.
So I'd like to just add something to what Shariq was saying. See, the thing is that there is a certain kind of content that you plan to watch. Cinema viewing is usually planned. I know I'll go to watch the cinema with my family during a weekend or whenever it works for me, and the kind of cinema I want to watch. The kind of short content you're talking about is something that you could watch while you're driving. You could be in a local train. So that will continue to be consumed, right? So the bottom line is that the content will always be in demand, and we are so used to watching content, especially in India, because your question was specifically to India first. I mean, as a middle class, I can't think of anything else that a family usually does on a weekend. They probably go to a mall and then go to a theater to watch. The question is what kind of content they want to watch, and that answer, I think we all have to give.
Okay, so you want to say something clearly?
Yeah, I want to say something because I want to, I guess, take a slightly different line. I think if you just do a sort of quick go around amongst the audience and ask them how many series or how many pieces of content they have heard about, good words, and they are yet to watch it. I think all of us are running a content watching deficit right now.
10 plus on my list.
Right?
Yeah.
10 plus, 7 plus, 5 plus. And I think that simply is an indication that the fact that we are not able to, as audience, cope up, with the amount of oversupply of content, So I would actually say that if there is one thing we've experienced, and I'm right now focusing more on India, is from a content deficit state that we were in as a country, we have gone to a humongous surplus of content so far as the audience is concerned, because now I have, of course, whatever I used to watch in my language. I have, of course, the global best to choose from. And lo and behold, I have also got some of the best content from the regional basket, So I think we are clearly going into a content, surplus zone. And this is the new problem that we have not dealt with as content makers, because typical traditional problem of content makers is distribution. Okay, a small film is there. How does it go into theaters? People are not giving enough theaters. How does a documentary reach someone? That problem is solved. An Elephant Whisperer and 15 other documentaries are all there on a platform. They are inside your phone. Where is the problem? The problem is you don't have the time, because your time is being consumed in those Insta Reels, in those 15 other things, and as Hastings famously put it, in other necessary things such as sleep. So I think for the first time in India, content is not competing with content, it is competing with other physiological needs, and which is why we are all running a content watching deficit. So there is clearly a new equilibrium that we need to find, and we have a huge surplus. We don't have the time to cope up with it.
So according to our research, in the year 2022, December, right, there were 3,000 hours of premium OTT content created at an average cost, okay, of 88 lakhs per hour, okay, which is huge. We are talking about 2,500 plus crores only on premium OTT content. On top of that, you have movies. On top of that, you have 1 lakh hours of television content, news content of 4 lakh hours, and I don't know how many hours of, UGC content created across the country. And even if I look at professional UGC, that's almost touching 50,000 hours of just professional UGC content in this country. And you're talking about a content surplus, Ajit. So will this survive? Or will there need to be a rationalization on pricing? Or what's going to happen?
No, I think what happens is whenever this kind of cycle takes place, you need to find a new equilibrium. We need to ask, why are we in a surplus? We are in a surplus because there is a lot of different money which is chasing a building phase. So there was a phase when Hotstar Disney was building and they were going left, right and center, putting new content out. There was a time when our American friends, be it Netflix or Amazon, were making every content maker in this room and beyond very, very happy. This is a time when, Jio is going to build, and put up the next big invitation and big sort of mall of content, So I think we have to see these things, that every time there is a new infusion of a requirement to build a platform or a studio or what have you, you will actually have injections of big demand for makers. But I think what I'm saying is you need to focus on the consumer, because a consumer can only watch so much because he has finite time. So I'm actually looking at the consumer and I'm saying, okay, how does he have the time? And if his limited time is already being contested by so much oversupply, so now what do I do? Because this has huge implications on content makers, I mean, we talk often about inequality, that the rich are getting richer, poor are getting poorer. In the general economic sense, I think we see a big wedge of inequality in content. So a Pathan will go and rock the world and RRR will rock the world. But what happens to the millions of other things which may not be outlier, but which are decent content? Suddenly there is no attention on them. And most of us make our bread by making, let's say, decent content, because nobody can claim to make all content outliers,
Yeah.
So what happens to this, the middle, which, was the sustaining sort of ecosystem, is really the question that I think we should be pondering upon. And I think I'm
going to
Sorry,
ask you that
Ashish, I just want to add over here. I think the numbers that you are saying are, staggering. But I think we put it in context of 1.3 billion or 1.4 billion, whatever the latest figure is. We got a huge population. I think we're just seeing it from a very narrow lens. It's 1.3
Shariq,
billion people watching.
Any lens you look at it, I don't have China numbers. Any other country you look at it, our per capita content production is highest on earth. Okay, because of the languages that we have, correct? So we always will have a much higher number than that. And the thing is that till a few years back, this content didn't travel too much. Now it travels, and therefore one of the reasons for the surplus is probably the traveling content. Okay, which brings me to someone like you. At your end, the way you're seeing content, is content traveling? Do you see more options for travel? And do you see, as was discussed in, when Gaurav was taking the first session, do you see Indian content even going abroad after a while in a sustainable manner, and not just for, diaspora, but for the global audience? How do you see the future of Indian content?
So I think content is already making its way to the West. I think RRR was a great example of that. I think if that was the film that we had gotten behind a little earlier in its distribution life cycle, I think the film would have made a lot more headway in the Western market. I think what's happening is that when, we did a film called Mission Majnu, which released in January, and there was a lot of conversation about why we're not taking it to theaters and why we're taking the platform route on it. And actually, for me, the understanding was fully different. What I realized is when you take a film which has high visibility and put it out on a platform which also has a lot of demand, I think you on day one reach a much larger audience, which otherwise in its theatrical cycle might take a little longer. If there's one thing we've learned from the West, I think, is that, film can really be soft power. Yeah. You can tell stories that might not be convenient to watch otherwise. So I actually feel that it is great to be able to take these films to put them on platforms. And yeah, I think it's much, much easier to reach a much wider audience now compared to what it was maybe 5 or 7 years ago.
So distribution is solved. Now it's up to the storytelling, in effect, is what I'm hearing. Ajit, you run one of the most, if not the most successful OTT platform in your state, right? And growing from scratch, doing some wonderful innovation on the kind of content. And though I don't watch too much South content, I did watch some of the stuff out there, and I thought it was very powerful, impactful stuff. But do you see 3 years down the line that the OTT platforms like yours, I'm not saying yours specifically, but regional OTT platforms will still be just content hubs, or will they evolve into a content plus plus model? How do you see the future of content on a regional OTT platform?
So, no disagreements with what's been said so far, but so if you look at today's 25 to 30-year-old, the core consumer, I think for them, for the next 5 to 7 years, the demand for good content will continue to be there. Yes, there's need for more language content than Hindi content. There is need for a wider genre base of content. Like people say TV is dead, right? But TV is still growing. Tier 2, Tier 3 will come in. But I think the only additional point I wanted to make is that if you look at today's 15-year-old, I think that makes me nervous, and I think to a lot of people, because they're not consuming the kind of content we are making. They don't care about 10-hour series. They don't care about 2.5-hour films. They are on short form and they are on gaming. So for us to be ready when that kid, 15-year-old kid becomes 25, the kind of content they'll consume will be very different. So entertainment is not going anywhere. But I think in the 5 to 7 years time frame, the kind of content that 15-year-old of today will consume is a challenge that we all should gear up for. That is one. For the present, I think if we get more writers and if we make it at the right price, I think the demand for content is not going anywhere.
Ashish, as a producer, are you experimenting with some of this new stuff? And even if you want to, is there a willing buyer right now to try some of your more experimental stuff?
So honestly, this is not the best time to experiment for the theaters, clearly, because what we thought used to work is not working, at least in the Hindi industry. But OTT is definitely giving us options to experiment. And that's the beauty of OTT. You can create any genre, you can create it for any mood, any kind of an audience, any kind of a target in terms of countries that you can reach to. And my experience at Netflix actually taught me that content does travel a lot and we are not even aware of it sitting over here. And probably I've discussed this in some of the other forums, but there was a title called Little Beam. It's an animation, 5-minute piece of content only for toddlers and is on Netflix. It became the most viewed animated content out of Netflix when the season 1 had come out. The reason was simple. It was silent, so there was no spoken language. It had a lot of music, which attracted the toddlers, and it was very colorful and bright, which is something that people liked. So the point I'm trying to make here is, please try and create content that can travel, and sky's the limit. So this is the time to experiment, but probably you can do it only for OTT and not for the cinemas, because the downside with the cinema release is huge.
Shariq, on the cinemas front, sorry, I have to ask this question before you comment on this. Okay, you guys have had a very high success rate relatively, right, as on the cinema side. What's the secret? Because we are seeing some films work, some films don't work. And honestly, I can't seem to find any equation or a formula any longer. So what's the future of cinema content? What kind of content will you produce for cinema? Multiplex, single screen, massy, classy? I mean, what's the next steps?
It's all of it. Just to take off on your earlier question about experimentation. So, we started about a couple of years ago where I said that we must try and do stuff, how to make films travel overseas, because there's no one better than us to reach the Indian diaspora. So we started crafting, and it so happened that in this calendar year itself, we've had 3 films which have been official selections in 3 prominent film festivals. So we had a film called Joram, which went to Rotterdam. We had a film called Atma Pamphlet, which was in the Berlin selection. And we got an Anurag Kashyap film called Kennedy, which is in Cannes. So, making films which kind of, which you believe in, and then putting it out to the curators of the world does pay dividends if you put your mind to it. And I think we've got enough such content being created, but we're not giving it the legs to travel. Now, these 3 films are at the film festivals. I don't know what's going to happen to it, but that at least it's put us on a world map where we've traveled to each of these festivals, and we've seen that there's a whole new world outside which is way beyond our, ye Friday mein is picture ka kya hoga. How this model is going to evolve in terms of making money of it, I still don't know. But by virtue of reaching out to sales agents and distributors worldwide, I think that's a learning which we as an organization are doing this year to try and see how do you make films which can appeal to the Caucasian, white, or in Africa or in Europe or wherever it might be. So we're doing that, and at the same time, we've got a Maidan, we got a Gadar, we just released Kisi Ka Bhai Jaan, we did Kashmir Files last year. So we, a lot of makers come to me and say that, what is it that you're looking for? Is there a brief? I said, there's no brief. I have to do big, small, medium, left wing, right wing, entertainers, serious films, all of it, because I don't know what, again, at the right price, because I don't know what is going to stick where. So we got Bhaijan, which is released this weekend, and it's just done tremendous business in the mass centers, in the single screen theaters. Now, what has happened is that all of us have got so focused on this multiplex movie. What started off 20 years ago, multiplexes was a space for films which were slightly more niche to come in and find screen space, because it was only going to the mass. The entire thing has changed suddenly in the last 20 years, where there's no space for a mass film is kind of scoffed at or laughed at because, the Twitterati thinks that ye kya bakwas bana rahe. But if you see the people who are coming out, and, this classification of good film, bad film, I don't understand. I mean, who decides? Who are we to decide what is good or bad? You liked it or you didn't like it, that's fine. Has it made money? Has it not made money? That is the producers, the producers look out, right? Sometimes, I think today only, Hansal or someone tweeted, right? Saying that there are, good movies, terrible movies have made, lots of money. So the point is that what will appeal to a large section of the paying audience, we don't know. And I think it's wrong on our part to to diss something which has made a lot of money and you didn't like it and saying ये बकवास picture इतना business कैसे करी है या ये इतनी अच्छी picture क्यों नहीं चल रही है. I think it comes down to the audience, and all of us are audiences first. We are makers, secondly. So, as a studio and as creators, we just have to, make films that we think at this price point can, give a return on investment. And of course, make sure that the vision of the maker is respected, and you have to give them the freedom to do it. If we try and put a cookie cutter mentality on each of the films that we are working on, we'll never be able to do it. I'm working with Anil Sharma and Anurag Kashyap. I mean, I keep saying we've got a schizophrenic studio where, morning we're with Anil and then evening we're with Anurag, and we're like, what are we doing? So
you want to say something? Yeah.
Yeah, so I moved to Hyderabad, the cusp of the South movie industry 4 years back. And I keep wondering, right, what is different about the filmmakers there versus the filmmakers and the friends in Bombay. And I don't think the creativity is different. I just think there's a lot more conviction and fearlessness backed by the survival of the single screen. Now look at the conviction of a producer in South. He actually rents the single screen theater and de-risks the owner of the theater and takes all the risk and goes and makes films, not just Arha. Look at a film like Kartikeya 2 or Bimbisar or Vikram, where Kamal sir didn't appear in the film for the first half. He was not there. I think it's a lot of conviction to be able to give mass entertainment, and I think some of it is helped by the fact that single screens still thrive there, while in the north we've moved largely to multiplexes.
So is that a segment that's waiting for all of us to kind of revive, which is the single screen market in the north?
Absolutely.
But will that then require a different kind of content as well?
No, so I think the first thing is the revival of the single screen theaters for that. The multiplex pricing. If you ask me what do we need to do to really revive the industry? Of course, star pricing coming down and popcorn pricing coming down. I mean, till that does not rationalize, it doesn't make sense.
I hear a lot of that, Shariq. Okay,
yeah,
popcorn is the big deterrent rather than the movie.
Absolutely.
No, but what happened to popcorn prices in Drishyam or Pathan? Were they dropped?
No, they weren't. Valid point. Ashish, coming back to you. Okay, and then Amara, the same question I'm asking both of you actually. Okay, is that, would you guys go and make those movies now? Or would you first wait for the single screen infra to come up? What comes first?
No, so you have to back your content first. So how will the single screen revive if you don't make the right content for them? They can't just revive out of the blue. I mean, suddenly you won't have an audience walking in, right? So like Shariq said, Salman Sir's star power pulled in the single screen for an Eid release. The content may still be debatable, and I'm not saying it's a bad film. I'm just saying, but it did pull in the crowd. So it did attract a certain audience, the target audience, whether it was the star power or the trailer or the songs or the action. So as creators, we have to create that content and which we feel will appeal to the single screen to an extent. It could be a balance of both also. And Pathan is a very good balance of both. It was a mass film, if you actually ask me, but done in a very classy way, done in a very international way. And it appealed to both. The business is mind-blowing across India, across the globe. So as creators, we have to put our thoughts, around it.
So mass film, class treatment, formula.
And also let's not forget, no, I'm not saying that mass film has class treatment. What I'm trying to say is that over COVID, a lot of people have actually watched a lot of international content sitting in India. Everything has changed. We are not making films like we used to make in the 50s and 60s and 70s. Every decade sees a change in the kind of films, in the kind of format, in the way you make your films, the cameras, a lot of things change, technology changes. But with COVID, what happened, I think this is my personal belief, that instead of that decade, in 2 years, you got to see a lot of international content. And suddenly the way that content is presented, whether it is the way you shoot a film, the way the actors act, everything is very nuanced. Talking about. So we have to be very careful about where we have shifted post-COVID. But to answer your question in short, we have to cater to the single audience to make the business grow, and it can be done.
Okay, Amar, your take.
I agree with Ashish. I think one big gap we have is that for the last 5-7 years, we're working lesser and lesser with filmmakers who could deliver those kind of films, right? So we've basically cultivated lots of filmmakers who my ex-boss Ronnie used to say, the ones between Bandra and Andhare. And unfortunately, I think there is a challenge when you try and make single screen cinema with them. So the first thing we'll have to do is get filmmakers who understand the syntax of that and make it, because that's the sweet spot of making a mass film, but giving it the kind of finish that, probably Pathan has. Again, coming back on what Shariq said, I think, when is the last time we saw film where the hero singing 3, 4, 5 songs in the film, right? We've gone into not using, our biggest strength has been our music, and we've just kind of buried that somewhere. But when Salman sings 3 and 4 and 5 songs in the movie, the songs are chartbusters, and when the audiences come in, they're enjoying that film because they know the music. I was reading a deck a while ago, and it said that 40% of regular cinema goers, I think it was a PVR deck, which said that 40% of regular cinema goers post the pandemic have stopped coming into theaters. So I think the opportunity there is to obviously bring them back. We do need the big ticket films, and we do need the big screen extravaganzas, but we have to get the filmmakers who can make that.
And I think we're running out of time, and I want to leave some time for questions from the audience, but I'm going to ask for each of you to give me one thought before we go into the audience. Starting with you, Shariq, that over the next 3 years, what's that one principle or mantra that you believe is what the Indian content industry should focus on to get future ready? What's that one big thing that needs to change?
No, I think it's what Ajit said. I think that, you have to be convinced on what you're making and who you're making it for, and go all out for it, whether it's a, single screen, multiplex, niche, festival, whatever it is, just do it with conviction and,
So conviction for good content that you believe
conviction
in.
for what you believe in. Again, because everyone sets out to make good content, right? Ultimately, the audience might not think it's as good or whatever, but everyone is out to make.
Don't get swayed by data. Go for what you believe in.
Go for what you believe in.
Ajit, what about you?
So, a creative thought: Indian stories mounted on the scale of Marvel.
Wow. That I would love to see something like that. I really would. Ashish.
So for me, it's always been entertainment. I think that has to continue without a doubt. But I was also going to say exactly what Ajit said, that stick to our own stories. We have a lot of stories to tell. Don't ape the West. And tell your stories with the characters, and don't forget the heroes, because I think we've lost all of that, off late. And play with your characters, play with your culture, play with everything. The world is out there wanting to watch Indian films.
I sometimes feel on your point of heroes that we have more heroes now in the cricket field than in the cinema screens. But very good point. Yes.
Bring back the hero. I think we're missing
Bring back the hero.
the heroes in our cinema. And I think if we get them back, the audience is alive and kicking for them.
Ajit, you are going to give me something very contrary. I can see it in you.
No, nothing contrary here. I think if there is one lesson out of what has happened in cinemas, I think it's a reminder that you cannot forget a very large segment in the chase of your own conviction between Bandra and Juhu, And I think, chase your conviction, but do remember you're not making it for yourself. You're making it for a very large country, India, which has got a huge diversity and number of audience. And I think we've got to learn that from how South has done it and focus on that large mass of consumer. I think that is when you will get
Focus on the
outstanding
mass.
results.
Yeah, focus on the end
Focus
consumer.
on the universal story, focus on the large mass, and I think that's where the big outlier success is going to come from.
And the multiplex audience can watch it on OTT. That's fine.
We've got several options. As I said, they are sitting with a surplus of what content they have to watch. So don't worry about them.
Okay, I think that was fascinating. I think I learned a lot. Any questions for this panel of 100 years of experience at your service? Yes, please.
This is Vishakha Varakna, and thank you so much. I would like to ask this question in Hindi. I'm not very good in English, so in Hindi. So, हम लोग बहुत टाइम से ये बात कर रहे हैं कि कंटेंट बेस्ड होनी चाहिए स्टोरी, कंटेंट बेस्ड और टारगेट जो है वो ऑडियंस होनी चाहिए. तो मेरा एक क्वेश्चन है कि कितने टाइप की ऑडियंस होती है. मतलब हम लोग को एक्चुअली यही नहीं पता कि क्या किस टाइप की ऑडियंस होती है, क्योंकि जब मैं एक किसी कंटेंट को ऐसे देखती हूँ कि मतलब बहुत आर्टिस्टिक फिल्म लगती है मुझे, तो मुझे लगता है, और वो हिट होती है, तो मुझे लगता है कि ऑडियंस बहुत जाग गई है, आज ऑडियंस को सिर्फ कंटेंट चाहिए. बट जब मैं एक ऐसी फिल्म देखती हूँ जिसमें कोई कंटेंट ही नहीं है, कुछ है ही नहीं, मुझे समझ में नहीं आ रहा है, और वो जब हिट हो जाती है तो फिर मेरे दिमाग में आता है ये ऑडियंस चेंज हो गई है. मतलब आप एक पॉइंट पे आप एक बहुत रियल स्टोरी को बहुत हिट बना रहे हैं और आप एक तरफ धूम-धा चल रही फिल्म में और आप उसको बहुत हिट बना देते हैं। तो मैं बहुत कंफ्यूज हूँ कि कितने टाइप के ऑडियंस है, ताकि जब तक बीज नहीं पता होगा मुझे पौधा बनाने में कौन सा पौधा उगाना चाहिए उसका पता चले। तो आई वुड लाइक टू आस्क
देखिए ये जो आप है ना पौधे की बात कर रही है, जंगल है, तो यहाँ पर हर किस्म के पौधे आप बनाइए, कौन सा पौधा कहाँ पर आपको ज़्यादा छांव देता है वो अगर वो हमें भी नहीं पता है तो आप मतलब एज अ मेकर जैसे मैंने कहा कन्विक्शन से बनाइए। ऑडियंस अगर आपको पता है कि आप किसके लिए बना रहे हैं ये पिक्चर और वो ऑडियंस तक आप कहाँ तक उस ऑडियंस को आपको रीच करना है, एक बार वो रीच कर वो अगर वो ब्रिज हो गया तो फिर ऑडियंस अपने आप से शायद कुछ ऐसी पिक्चरें होती हैं जो शायद बॉक्स ऑफिस या थिएटर में शायद ना चले, मगर हर पिक्चर एक अपना ऑडियंस ऑन ओटीटी ऑन टीवी। कितनी पिक्चर है, टार्जन द वंडर कार मोस्ट फेमस, या आप पकड़िए सूर्यवंशम कौन सा थी सोनी पर जो है, तो आज भी जब भी आती है रेट करती है। तो ऑडियंस आप अपने कन्विक्शन से बनाइए बस।
भले ये इंडस्ट्री जंगल है पर मैं जंगल नहीं बना सकती हूँ, कैपेबिलिटी भी होनी चाहिए इंसान में। मैं सिर्फ एक पौधा क्रिएट कर सकती हूँ और वो पौधा कौन सा होना चाहिए और कौन सी ऑडियंस को टारगेट करके जिसमें मैं शुरुआत करूँ। तो
बैंगन ट्री बनाइए, बैंगन ट्री वो 100 साल तक चलेगी।
थैंक यू।
Thank you everybody. My name is Rahul Khan. It was very learning experience to listen to you guys. I want to know other budgets filling, especially to Ajit Singh sir and Shariq sir, because when we make a movie for 150 crores and then it doesn't turn out well, there could have been 5 or 6 movies made on a smaller budget with better content which would have gone down well. So other budgets failing us nowadays. Thank you.
So budget fail us at every level. It's not about that 400 crore film, but even a 10 crore film can fail and make you a total loss. So it finally depends on the content and the target audience that you're reaching out to. Post-COVID, what had happened was there was a huge discussion about let's make the films bigger so that the audience come to the theaters and don't sit at home. So that was the plan. Most of the people, even now, when we are talking about the so-called pan-India films, the big films with a big hero from the south, big hero from the north. I mean, the idea is to make those big films so that there's a revival of cinema, which is the main bread and butter business actually, and should be for content for us as filmmakers. And to the point that we discussed earlier, bringing the audience to the single screen, you need to make those big budget films. And most of them have made money. It's not that they haven't made money. Yes, you're right. If they fail, you lose out on that money also. But then it's a question of ROI, right? You make a percentage, whether it's a 10 crore film, you can lose your entire 8-10 crores on that. But with a 200 crore film, maybe you end up making just 40 crores, or you end up losing 20 or 40 crores. It's a percentage of what you're investing, like any other business.
Way of introduction, my name is Esteemed Parihar. I'm a media practitioner as in a script writer, and I also teach at Mumbai University colleges, script writing, content writing. My question is generally addressed to everybody who wishes to answer this, that while we talk about content, make content according to your gut feeling, 10 years ago it was different, now it is more, niche driven. Is there any kind of mechanism that channel houses have or think to have in alliance with a research department, which maybe say researches on the kind of needs that your population or country or even a town has and make a program? Even that is very time consuming, but to make a program for a wider audience, has a channel thought of investing in tandem, parallel with the research, finding and making programs? Like we had Jasti Jaisa Koi Nahi. We got a lot of feedback from the audience which helped to build further episodes. That is one way, but how important do you think is research to make better quality programs for a wider audience? Because India is as wide as it gets.
So, I'm not personally a big fan of script research, though that also exists now with agencies like Ormax. But I think being in touch with your consumers and continuously meeting them, whether you're running a platform or making cinema, I think is a very important part of understanding the ever-evolving audience, because they're changing every 1 to 3 years. So I think research is a very important part of it, but I think a lot more experiential and being there and meeting them and then looking at data that is available.
So is it happening actively? This element of...
Ma'am, I'm so sorry to cut you right here.
We can take it offline.
Yeah,
No issue.
please.
Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you so much. Ashish, any closing thoughts?
No, I'm awed as always with these gentlemen because they always open my mind further. I hope you guys also had a great session, and with that, a big applause for all of them. I think we all learned a lot. Thank you and have a good day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.